Morning, everybody. This is Beverly, your excuse me, instructor with a frog in my throat. I want to talk for just a few minutes about the ethics course, and looking at chapters 1 and 2. If we're going to kind of keep on that rotation. One of the things I want to point out to you very importantly is to look on the very front of the book. Just opposite from the title page. I'm going to hold it up so you can see this page right here. I realize it's backwards, but see, there's your title page. On the opposite page, it gives you that information for free premium content. And all you have to do is go to the referenced URL address, use the password professional, and you come up with some resources. I like these resources. The instructor guide for this book is not hitting on a whole lot, but these are some great resources. And so I go ahead and do that. I think you have to log in each time when you look at them, but there may be a way that you can download them. But we're going to look at some of those, and certainly there's an exercise in there that I want you to do and respond to, and I'll post that on the website when I am posting this. So when we're talking about ethics, I believe in chapter 1, you have defined ethics of what ethics is or are. And for some people, it's very different, I guess. I believe that when you, as the book says, I'm looking at page 25 in the book, that when you are in public service, you have a higher responsibility to adhere to an ethical standard. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I truly believe that we must hold the public trust and value that and serve that through our jobs. I know as a firefighter, police officer, I don't know about other jobs within public service, you take an oath of office. And that basically says you're going to uphold the laws. And your book in chapter 2 brings up a great question. And looking at that on page 50 at the very bottom, it says 2 questions in particular have hounded public service for centuries. What are a manager's obligations in the face of an illegal directive? And what if the manager dissents and sincerely believes a law is unjust, wrong, or immoral? And that is a true dilemma for those of us in public service. My most recent fire department position, I left, and I left of my own accord. But I cited moral and ethical. I didn't use the word disagreements. I said some moral and ethical issues, I think was the way I put it. And it was not necessarily the way the public was being served, but the way that the leadership was leading the department down this road that I didn't want to go. And it was my choice. It was my values and my ethics. And I've done research about a values-driven organization, and it has been found that if someone doesn't believe or doesn't have that same value set or same ethics, that usually that person leaves. And what happened in my situation was it was a new chief that had come in. And so they kind of self-regulate in some ways. But when we're talking about laws, it's a little bit different. And we're going to look at an exercise a little bit later. I'm going to have you write a response to this particular exercise. So when we are looking at values in public service, many times there's a higher standard. You know, I first remember when I came into the fire service, I was kind of a late bloomer in the fire service, but I would go. There was this thing, you would go out to eat, and you didn't dare go and have a drink in your fire department uniform. You didn't do that. But then the guy from the water department could, or the guy from sanitation could, or the guy from the electrical department could. And so I believe in public safety, there is perhaps even a higher standard than what exists for than others in public service, where perhaps they just have a job. Ours is much more than a job. Your book defines an ethical value as one that is deeply held belief about right and wrong actions, and it gauges what's important. And I believe that as well, and that it is to be used as a decision-making tool and actions. So our actions are based upon our ethics and our values. Principles are the values with the action to it. That's what you see from someone. My mother always had this saying of, what you do speaks so loud, I can't hear what you're saying. And so many times it may be that we say something or say our ethics are one thing when our actions are showing something totally different than what is reality for us, or what we are doing. So um, it's a I don't want to say it's a slippery slope, but it is a very crucial and critical piece of what we do in public safety. We have to be trusted. We have to, I believe, have the highest values. Now, we're not perfect, and we don't have to be perfect. And many times, I believe in what we're saying, that we can hold these values, but how does a community know this is what we value? And it's through what we do. And so we have to make sure that our actions are are demonstrating our values. And that becomes maybe a little difficult sometimes. So values may be associated with moral character. Here in the South, we tend to look at that religious aspect of values. And I can't speak for other places because I haven't lived in other places. And so, but it may be that there's other value sets or value systems. On page 33, your book references the political responsibility, a professional responsibility, and a personal responsibility about these actions and what the differences are. And one of the things that we have to make sure is that there's not a competing value system within ourselves. The book references the different roles that we have in society or in our lives, that personal, family, community, from a personal standpoint, professional or work identity, your job, your agency that you work for, your jurisdiction, and then kind of the sustainability, humanity type of responsibility as well. One thing I'll say for this book, it has some pretty complicated visual aids that go along with it. There certainly is that concept of integrity and how that fits into ethics and values. Integrity is a value that I think kind of is an overarching type of value that speaks to a lot of different things. I think when we look at today's politics at the national level, just this week, Trump has been bashed, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, for his comments about Haiti and Africa. I tend to live on the edge of national politics, right or wrong, but trying to fit that into an ethical or values category sometimes gets muddy and sometimes gets very difficult. In chapter 2, I think it was very interesting when we look at these questions on page 50, what is a manager's obligation in the face of an illegal directive? What if they sincerely believe that the law is wrong? And one of the resources that you have access to is that's referenced there is the police report on the arrest of Rosa Parks, who chose to sit at the front of the bus. And I've always kind of wondered about that, and now I think I understand a little bit better in looking at that of what law did she break, Jim Crow laws were state and local laws that enforced segregation. And if you look at her police report in the police report about her, in that the online resources, you see that the actual charge was disobeying the directive of the bus driver. Those were the actual charges, because he told her she had to move, and she said, "I'm not moving today." And so, what did he think about that? What was his race? I assume, given the times, that he was most likely white. But I've always wondered, did she break a law, or did she just break tradition? My mother and I have had conversations about that time in her life as a little girl, and how you just took those things for granted. It's kind of like when we say we're looking at in the legal class, read the legal professional class. I'm sorry, not research, but the legal issues class this semester, where we say, "Oh, that's against the law." Well, is it really? And apparently, at the time, there were Jim Crow laws on the books. I haven't done enough research into Jim Crow laws to know, but those were, and it does say they weren't federal. There was no federal law. They were state and local laws that enforced segregation. But if you look at her police report, she was charged with disobeying the directive of the bus driver. And so, what was his feeling about that? I've always said that if I had grown up during that time, I would have been with Martin Luther King. I would have, I do believe that everyone is equal. And, how we can deal with that today. And the book brings out some points of different rules and regulations that maybe we have to enforce in our job. And even if we don't like them, we don't agree with them, we still have to enforce them, and how that conflicts perhaps with our personal ethics. And like myself, when is it time to perhaps jump ship? So your book brings out to me a great decision-making model. They call it a go, no-go decision model. And it's pretty simple, if you ask me. And the questions that they ask, is it ethical? Is it legal? And is it effective? I have to, whether it's effective or not, sometimes may not enter into our decision-making or into our ethical decision-making process. If it's a law and we don't think it's effective, if it's a law and it's ethical, we may not. To me, that being effective is the least of the three. But you can see on page 59 in the book, they have that little model, and there's that little gray area in the middle where effective, ethical, and legal overlap. And that's where we are good to go. So as to me, this is a little bit of a decision-making model that we employ every day. And if you look at Exhibit 2.2 on page 60 in your book, and applying this go, no-go decision-making model, I think It speaks to our area of expertise even more. The cab of a chemical truck overturned on a country road, trapped the driver, precipitating an immediate threat to the driver in the local area. Although untrained and ill-equipped for the specific hazard, the local volunteer emergency service was first on the scene and went in for an immediate and successful rescue. At the inquiry conducted by the state board, the local chief insisted that the successful rescue was anything but reckless or irresponsible. I sort of weigh the risk. I wouldn't do anything that would hurt my people more than the good that we might do. So we've heard that before, risk a lot, save a lot. But we know that our job is to help people. So what else could we have done? And so enter the go, no go model. Should the chief attempt the rescue? Is it legal? Is it ethical? Was it effective? The problem comes in when we don't know if it's going to be effective or not. I'm going to assume that it was legal for them to do that, even though they weren't trained. Ethics is how you measure this in an ethical manner. His intentions were the purest, I believe, to save the driver, to do his job. If you knew that that one of your responders was going to be hurt doing this, would that alter your assessment? And I hope that answer is yes. And if you put on that chief's hat, what else would you think about before responding? And so using this go, no go decision-making model, I think is important. That these are questions that we must ask ourselves. Is it legal? Is it ethical? Is it effective? So when we are spurring ourselves to action, from an enforcement side, it's a little bit easier. I think about code enforcement. Is it effective? Is that really our decision to make? But in this situation, are we going to be effective if we don't have all of those things? So let's see. What I want to do right now. So that's just kind of some food for thought. As I said, this is probably more rambling than anything else. The book is very deep, as I'm sure you already know. But I want to add some teeth to it. What I want you to do is I want you to look at that, go to that website, use that link or that password, and pull up and look at those things. And there is a case study. I know that you can't read this, it's backwards. To obey or not to obey. I'm also going to post this in a Word document. I'll upload it to the course site as well. But I want you to read this case study, and I want you to answer the questions. There's 5 questions at the back. I'm going to, when I put it in there, I'll put some kind of a word count, or otherwise, I don't want just a yes or no answer. These are discussion questions, so I want you to discuss a little bit on paper. But I think that this really, sometimes when we read in the book, it's very clear. It's crystal clear what we should do or what our obligations are. And then you start reading things like this that are so real life, and they're not so crystal clear anymore. So I want you to look at that and take a look at those resources that are available to you. Look at that arrest report from Rosa Parks. It was very interesting. Today just happens to be the day after the Martin Luther King holiday for his birthday. So it's very much present on everyone's mind. Something just came up on my screen. I apologize. Again, I apologize for the ramblings. This is a very deep issue, and I think this is one that, if you think about a face-to-face class, this is where you can really get into it. And I hope that as we go through the rest of the semester, that we can get into it, whether it is, you can feel free to upload video to me. Hopefully, we're going to have some face-to-face meetings virtually. And through discussions and these projects, I want to try to hammer out some of this because I believe that in Government today, ethics is one of the biggest issues that we have. And that for many people, answering those three questions, is it legal, is it ethical, is it effective, is really hard, or else they don't want to answer them, and so they don't look at them. So stay tuned for more, and I'll get this posted onto the course site. And thanks so much for your time. Sorry for all the rambling. I will promise to do better next time. Thanks.